Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. The WSL is back after a couple of weeks away, and that means we are back podcasting as well. I'm going to be giving you all the stats and all the facts you need ahead of this weekend's games. I'm your host, Stattorino. Yes, hello listener, welcome back to Decoding the WSL. It has been a couple of weeks since our last episode. We've had an international break in there, and we've obviously had a League Cup break as well as Chelsea Man United in the middle of that. Chelsea getting another win, carrying on their win streak under Sonia Bumpastor. She has won every single game as Chelsea manager in all competitions, which is very impressive. We are also testing out a bit of video tech today. Obviously, so far, Decoding the WSL has been purely a audio sort of platform. So we're trying out a bit of video. If it works, you'll be able to see it on YouTube. If it doesn't, it'll be just the same as normal. So regardless, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, as most people do, you will just get exactly the same experience as normal. Whereas if you're looking up on YouTube, then you'll be able to see me and my background, which I promise over time I will make a bit more sort of festive, for lack of a better word, maybe at Christmas time, or maybe just with things like football shirts and things like that in the background. So anyway, that is a little bit about what's going on, but we're going to get back into WSL action now, because it's obviously been a couple of weeks with nothing or very little, only one match in the league, but we're back with a full roundup of fixtures this Sunday. So the WSL gets back underway at LSV as Manchester United host Liverpool in the midday kickoff, and then the two cities in the league face each other at 1 o'clock, with the latest lioness Ruby Mason visiting her former club, who now obviously have Laura Blinkett-Brown, the other newest addition into the Lionesses lineup. Spurs haven't beaten Everton in 5 attempts, but could move into the top half if they manage to do so this weekend. Potentially the friendliest game in the WSL this weekend, maybe even so far this season, with 5 players facing their former side as Arsenal host Aston Villa at the Emirates. Then Chelsea will be hoping to continue their 100% record in all competitions and get their 13th win of the season when the high-flying Seagulls come to visit Kingsmeadow. And in my opinion, probably the most important game this weekend when the bottom 2 meet. If either West Ham or Crystal Palace manage to get a win, they could go as high as 7th, which will go a long way in that very sort of tight bottom 6, floating around that relegation zone at the bottom of the table. But with all those matches going on this weekend, we're going to make a start at LSV with Manchester United against Liverpool. Yes, this game is going to be live on Sky Sports. The Reds of Manchester United host what I assume will probably be either the black or the whites of Liverpool in this away fixture for them. Gemma Evans will be probably starting and facing the team that she left in the summer. It is 5th versus 6th in the league. These two teams were obviously fighting it out for 4th place last season. It did look like Manchester United were going to be higher in the table, but after a few sort of winless games in their last few, they have dropped down a little bit, with teams like Arsenal and Brighton getting ahead of them. But although it's 5th versus 6th in the league, these two teams are actually 6 points apart, with 11 goal difference apart as well. So Manchester United do have quite a big advantage over Liverpool in position. But obviously, if Liverpool manage to get a win on Sunday, they will then just be within one more win of getting into that top 5. These are the two teams with the most aerial duels in the league this season. 129 for Liverpool and 98-1 for Manchester United. That 129 largely Sophie Roman-Haug of Liverpool, as we know, although she hasn't played for the last 2 games, I think, is still by far and away the player with the most aerial duels won. This fixture last season was won by Liverpool both times in their WSL meetings. They last met back in October in the League Cup as well, so they are sides that obviously know each other relatively well. Manchester United's last game out was their first loss of the season against Chelsea in that 1-0, as I mentioned earlier. So they have been in pretty good form, especially defensively, even if not necessarily going forward. But I mean, no one's doing that well against Chelsea at the moment, so 1-0 is probably not too bad. Manchester United's last 6 games have all had less than 3 goals in them. So obviously that's not necessarily them scoring 3 goals. That's obviously other teams scoring as well. But it still shows that they are not having the most entertaining matches, shall we say. Liverpool's 1-0 loss last time out away at Everton was their first away loss in the WSL since January. So Matt Beard has got them, well, and has done for a while, performing quite well in away matches. Obviously, there was a bit of a blip in that Liverpool derby, the Merseyside derby away at Everton, but I would expect that they will be wanting to put that right this weekend. Liverpool, however, are the only team in the WSL this season without a clean sheet, despite the fact they are in the top half, showing that they are scoring quite a few goals to sort of counteract that. Marie Herbinger has the second highest shot creating actions in the league, which is going quite some way to helping Liverpool's creativity. Man United have the most yellow cards in the league so far this season. That's something that sort of escaped me. It wasn't until I was having a look at some of the stats. I try and pick out some different kinds of stats each week, as well as sort of the main ones. And yellow cards is one that I look at every now and then. Manchester United don't really strike me as a team that get loads of yellows and get loads of, commit loads of fouls. They're not the team that has committed the most fouls. And yet they have had the most yellow cards. So that goes a bit of a way to show what type of fouls they're making, I guess. Fallon Tullis-Joyce has been, I think, Manchester United's star player this season. Honourable mentions for, most of the back line, to be honest, and Grace Clinton. But Fallon Tullis-Joyce has 93.3% save percentage in the league, which is the highest out of any keeper, or any keeper that's played, I think, three or more times. And she also has the best performance against post-shot XG. If you're a regular listener to the pod, you'll know this. If you're new, post-shot XG is very similar to normal XG, but it's adjusted so it only talks about shots that are on target. It's a really good way for measuring how good a goalkeeper is at shot stopping. It's also known as goals prevented, if you might have heard that phrase before. Her goals prevented is at 5.9 so far this season. After only 8 games as well, that's quite a lot. So she's almost saving a goal a game more than you'd expect. So you'd expect Manchester United to have conceded another 6 goals this season. They definitely would not be, 6 points above Liverpool if she hadn't made all those saves. So in terms of how I think this game's going to go, I don't think it's going to be the most entertaining game of the weekend. I don't think it's going to be a goal fest. I think it will be one of those matches where Manchester United is pretty hard to break down. Liverpool are going to be doing their best to sort of penetrate the Manchester United defence, which has been pretty good so far this season. I think off the top of my head, they are the team that have conceded the fewest goals alongside Chelsea. I think it's 3 goals in their 8 games. But I don't think Manchester United are going to create that much either. I think they'll keep a clean sheet in this game, even though Liverpool do have good away form. I think Manchester United will keep a clean sheet and I think they will get on the score sheet. But I don't think it's going to be a goal fest, as I've said. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 Manchester United victory. Okay, on to the second game this weekend, and it is the two cities facing each other. It is Man City and Leicester City. 1 o'clock at the Joy Stadium, also live on YouTube. As I mentioned, Ruby Mace is facing her former club, fresh off her first England call-up at senior level. It is second against second bottom in the WSL this season. Definitely a very informed team in Manchester City against a very out-of-form team, and struggling going forward anyway in Leicester. City have won the last 9 league meetings between these two sides. They have definitely got Leicester's number, as to be honest, Man City have got quite a lot of teams' numbers. This fixture last season was 2-0, with Lauren Hemp and Chloe Kelly getting goals in the last 10 minutes to secure a win for Man City after a good defensive display by Leicester throughout. City have won all 7 home games this season, conceding just 1 goal, which is very impressive in the match they played against Aston Villa. Leicester, however, don't have quite so impressive stats. They have not scored in an away game since the opening day of the season. That is 4 league games and a cup game in that time. The cup game they did, however, win. It was a 0-0 where they won on penalties, but still no goal in sort of regulation time as such. Leicester are also the only team that have lost their last 3 WSL games, and they are the only team that have not scored in their last 3 WSL games. So yeah, as I've mentioned in previous pods before, it is not looking good for Amandine Mikel's side going forward. They are missing a lot of players, as we've already spoken about. They have Lena Peterman and Shannon O'Brien that are kind of coming back from injury. TBC on whether either of those will feature in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see either of them until after Christmas, but hopefully, fingers crossed their recoveries are going well and they may both feature. Yutrantala is out for a while. They've just got quite a long injury list of quite promising goal scorers for them, I guess. Obviously, Naomi Mouchon as well. She suffered an ACL injury. She was sort of the big main summer signing coming alongside Aminkini Mikel. I think if she was around, well, as well as Jutta Rantala as well, and Shannon O'Brien, Lena Peterson, as I've mentioned, I think they definitely would have been scoring goals and would not be relinquishing, down near the bottom of the table as they are. City are the team that has accumulated the most XG in the WSL this season with 17.2. Despite that, they've actually scored 10 goals fewer than Chelsea, but that's more Chelsea being good than City not being very good, or City being bad. But Bunny Shaw, nevertheless, has the most goals in the league, as I'm sure you already know, listener, with 7, and Jill Roord with 3, City's second top scorer, have both actually got more goals than Leicester this season with just 2. Leicester are the lowest scorers in the league with just those 2 goals, and they also have the lowest XG in the league with 4.4, which also shows that they're not performing well against their XG. If you're getting 4.4 XG, you're probably expecting to score 4, maybe 5 goals, not just 2. City, in terms of more positive stats for them, have the highest average possession in the league with 68%, and Leicester have the second lowest with 41%. So, yeah, it'll be, I think, definitely a game where City are going to be dominating possession this weekend. City have the most passes in the league with just over 5,000, and that's almost 1,000 more than anyone else, with Arsenal just over 4,000. City also have more than double the number of passes that Leicester have completed this season. Leicester on just under 2,300. City, definitely dominating that kind of space and showing that that's the sort of football they want to play. I think that'll go into Leicester's hands a little bit, because I know that Amandine Mikel said before that she's really focused on trying to do that kind of counter-attacking style of play, especially at the moment at Leicester. I think with the players they've got, they kind of need to do that, because they need to sit back and let the likes of, Johanna Keynes try and run down the pitch, maybe even Takarada doing a job, Ruby Mace trying to do a job up there, even though it's not necessarily, the most forward-thinking players. Normally, they are doing their best to do a job. City have the best take-on success rate in the league at 52%, so that'll be something that we'll try and test Leicester. In terms of how I think this game's going to go, I think it's going to be one-way traffic. I think it could be an absolute rout. If City go absolute full strength, they will, get 4, 5, 6, maybe even more. But I think this would be a good opportunity for them. They'll probably score in the first half, maybe early on in the second, something like that. And once they get a couple of goals up, maybe about on the hour mark, it's probably a good time to start giving minutes to those players that don't get that many minutes, especially against a side that isn't looking very threatening to score. So I think City will get a decent lead, and then I think they will not sit back, but they'll give minutes. They won't be quite as strong. They'll take your Bunny Shaws off. They'll take sort of Yuri Haskara off, those kind of players. So I'm going to go for a Man City 3-0 win. The other 1 o'clock game on Sunday is Spurs at home to Everton. This has Hayley Raso coming back, or hosting anyway, her former side. It's 7th versus 9th in the WSL. Both meetings between these sides in the league last season were draws. Spurs haven't had the best run against Everton recently. In fact, Spurs haven't beaten Everton in their last 5 meetings, as I mentioned. And in the 10 meetings they've had ever, Everton have won half of them. 4 of them have been draws, and Spurs have only won 1, which was back in the WSL in December 2021, with a Jess Naz goal being that 1-0. Spurs have also lost 5 of their last 6 games in all competitions. The 2-1 win against West Ham, which was with a 90th minute own goal, was the only one that saved that. But otherwise, they are on a real bad run of form. Spurs, however, have scored 2 or more goals in every WSL game that they've played at the Valley this season. Obviously, they did not play at the Valley when they played against Arsenal recently. But other than that, they've scored 2 or more goals in every WSL game at the stadium they're playing at this weekend. So, although they haven't beaten Everton in a while, you probably can, expect they're going to be getting at least a couple of goals. You think, Bethany England's looking good, Jess Naz is looking good, Sumonen's chipping in with the goals. Martha Thomas is doing all the right things, even though she hasn't got on the score sheet yet. Expect her to be scoring soon with the amount of XG she's creating. Something to keep an eye on this game is that Spurs have scored half of their goals this season in the last 15 minutes of games. So even if it's a bit close, even if Everton are looking maybe even like they're going to win or like they're going to at least get a point, if it's anything close, don't leave this game early if you go into it, because Spurs do score a decent portion of their goals, in those last 15 minutes. Everton have, 6 of Everton's last 7 games have had less than 3 goals in them. So if there are going to be at least a couple of goals for Spurs, that would then mean that there aren't going to be any for Everton. If it's going to remain with that, their only match that had 3 or more goals in the last 7 was their 5-0 loss at home to Chelsea. Similar to earlier, it's one of those that if you take Chelsea out, all the records sort of last a little bit longer. It's normally Chelsea that mucks them up. Everton's last WSL away game had their last WSL game had their first away goal of the season when they drew 1-1 away at Palace. Obviously, goals have been quite hard to come by for Everton this season. Don't expect them to score a lot this weekend. Although saying that, Spurs have conceded the most goals in the league so far this season. I think if you asked someone that hadn't really looked at the stats on this too much, you'd probably expect them to say Palace, because they had they're obviously new to the league. They had a big drubbing against Chelsea. They lost by 4 goals against Spurs at the start of the season as well. But no, Spurs are the team that conceded the most with 21. Everton, however, do have the worst record against their XG so far this season at -4.4. So with the chances that they're creating, you would expect them to have scored 4.4 more goals than the 2 goals that they currently have. Ash Neville has been brilliant. That is the only word I can use to describe her defensively so far this season. She has the most tackles won in the league with 27. She's made the most blocks with 23 and has made the most interceptions with 21. Expect her to be on the pitch. And if you haven't got her in your fantasy team so far, she might be one that you might want to consider. Spurs also have the best aerial duel success rate so far in the WSL this season, just over 54%. So that's another thing to consider. If Spurs are going to be getting goals this season, in this match, it could be due to that aerial presence. Obviously, Bethany England is very good in the air. How do I think this match is going to go? Well, I'm backing Spurs to make a bit of a statement in this game. I think they are going to win, and I think with that win, they're probably going to get themselves into the top half. They're not that far behind Liverpool now, and I think Manchester United will beat Liverpool. So if that happens and Spurs beat Everton, then they will go above them into 6th place. And I'm going to go for a 2-0 Spurs win. On to the second half of the WSL fixtures this weekend, and we're going to the Emirates for the 2:00 kickoff between Arsenal and Aston Villa. As I mentioned in that sort of spiel at the start, there are 5 players playing against their former clubs. Sabrina D'Angelo and Daphne Van Domselaar obviously had a bit of a swap at the start of the season, and then you've got Anna Patten, Jordan Nobbs and Noelle Moritz, who have all transferred from Arsenal to Aston Villa in recent seasons. It is 4th against 8th in the WSL this season. Probably 2 teams that are underperforming against where they thought they'd be at the start of the season. I certainly thought Aston Villa were going to be higher. I predicted them to be, I think, 5th in my predictions at the start of the season. And I think for Arsenal, I said it was going to be between 2nd and 3rd. After a couple of games, I would say I'd have changed that to Arsenal are going to finish 3rd. I still think they will, to be honest. I still think that although Brighton are ahead of them, I don't think Brighton are going to maintain this as long. And I think Arsenal will be comfortably 3rd come the end of the season. Villa in 8th place obviously are 4 points ahead of the relegation zone in 12th, but they are only 1 point ahead. So depending on how other matches go this weekend, they could be getting even closer, especially in terms of places, if not points. But these 2 teams have actually had the most corners in the league so far this season, which is something that I wouldn't necessarily have guessed. I know Arsenal tend to have a lot of corners. I sort of feel like that's a kind of play they tend to get. They've had 56, the most in the league. But Villa are second with 51. So there you are. Arsenal won both of these matches last season, both times they faced each other, and they won 4-0 in the League Cup as well. So they definitely have Villa's number in recent times. In fact, these 2 teams have faced each other 10 times in the past. Arsenal have won 8 of them. Villa won 1, which was a 2-0 win back in May 2023, and there was also a 0-0 back in May 2021. Arsenal are currently unbeaten since René Slager took over, obviously with the owner side about being, I don't know if the exact wording, if he was sacked or left the club, but potato. They are 11-1 in the league, 11 goals scored, 1 goal conceded since Slegers took over, with the 1-1 against Manchester United being the only goal they've conceded and the only game they haven't won. Villa, however, are winless away in the WSL this season. They've had 4 losses and a draw. So their away form still needs a bit of work under Robert Powell. Something that was kind of interesting that came out with the numbers when I was researching for this pod was that 2/3 of Villa's goals come in the second half in the WSL so far this season. So they don't tend to start that quickly. They tend to get, double the amount of goals in the second half as they do in the first half. So even if they go in at half time, a goal down or so, don't expect that is all they're going to be doing. They're going to come back at Arsenal in that second half. Arsenal have conceded the least XG in the WSL this season, which is no mean feat when you've got sort of the defensive powerhouse, for lack of a better word, of Manchester United and Chelsea. Obviously, Man City have so much of the ball that it's hard for the opposition to do anything with it. But still, Arsenal, who by all accounts aren't doing that well, aren't doing as well as people expect, defensively pretty good. Conceded the least XG, which is 5.1. Aston Villa also have the worst record against post-shot XG in the league, so they have scored 2.9 goals fewer than they would expect to with the post-shot XG that they've accumulated. Arsenal, in terms of creativity, are doing very well. They have the most key passes in the league with 103. Katie McCabe is actually second in the league with 26, behind just Lauren Hemp. Arsenal also have the most passes into the final third, 394, and the most passes into the box with 118. So you can see they're trying to progress, and they are succeeding to progress through the pitch, and not necessarily by carries, but just by passing. In terms of some of the players more specifically, and their kind of goal creation, Stina Blackstenius has the most goal-creating actions per 90 in the WSL this season with 1.47. Obviously, she tends to come on later in matches. At that point, it's a bit more gun-ho, it's a bit more high risk when she comes on because they normally need a goal. That's why she's on. She doesn't tend to come on when Arsenal are already winning, or not as much anyway. So yeah, she's got the most goal-creating actions per 90, 1.47. But interestingly, and I wasn't expecting this player to be up there, but second place for that is Paula Tomas, the Aston Villa left-back. She's obviously new this season. She's obviously been given quite a lot of sort of leeway to bomb down the pitch by Robert Powell. But yeah, 1.22 goal-creating actions per 90 is really high, and the second most in the WSL this season, more than the likes of Bunny Shaws and Lauren Hemps and Gura Reitens. Obviously, a goal-creating action doesn't have to be you're setting up someone else. You can be an action to create a goal for yourself. Stina Blackstenius also has the most XG per 90 in the WSL this season so far. You can see that 1.47. Goal-creating actions is largely her getting shots away. 0.85 XG per 90 is really high. It's pretty much a goal a game, especially if you overachieve your XG by 10% or so, as a lot of the elite strikers do, maybe 20%, you're getting a goal a game. Aston Villa are, a couple of stats about them. They are the only team yet to make an error leading to a shot in the WSL so far this season, which shows that when teams are coming up against them, they are having to beat them, which they're kind of doing without too much fuss, because obviously Aston Villa are down in 8th and only 1 point ahead of the relegation zone. But it's not because they're making silly mistakes. They've got the likes of Anna Patton at centre-back. She is having a brilliant start to the season. She was up for November Player of the Month. She's also been in my Team of the Week quite a few times. And yeah, they're just generally across that back four. They're rotating around a little bit, especially the left and right back. Lucy Parker's been playing when she's been available at centre-back alongside Patton as well. They're all doing quite well. Villa, however, something that I think they probably need to think about more longer term is that they do have the highest average age in the WSL so far this season. That is weighted by the amount of minutes a player has played. But yeah, the highest average age doesn't necessarily bode too well going forward. But obviously that's something that you can fix either by bringing players to the club or bringing players up through the ranks. And to be honest, some of their sort of older players that are bringing that up, you think of your Rachel Dailies, think of your Jordan Nobbs, Kenza Darley, those sort of players are kind of elite level players. So you can understand why they're getting played. How do I think this game is going to go? Well, I'm not just being biased here, I promise, as an Arsenal fan. This is genuinely what I think will happen. I think that Arsenal will dominate possession in this game. I don't think they're going to be threatened too much by Aston Villa. They'll probably keep a clean sheet. I wouldn't be surprised if Villa score, but I think it's more likely that they don't. Arsenal will likely create lots of chances. I think after a bit of a break and coming back together, they might not be quite as sharp as they always are. For Arsenal, that's often a problem. It was a big problem for them last season, not achieving their XG. So I think they're going to get a lot of chances. I think they're going to create more XG than they score, but I still think they're going to get a couple of goals. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Arsenal win. The other 2:00 game this weekend is Chelsea against Brighton at Kingsmeadow and live on YouTube. There are 3 players heading back to their old club in Frank Kirby, Jelena Kankovic and Maria Thorisdottir. Obviously, we're not necessarily expecting Frank Kirby to be there. She picked up a knock in England's game against USA, and I've not seen exactly what sort of timeline it is, but from the message she put on social media, I don't think she's going to be playing again this year. Probably coming back some point in the new year. We'll wait and see how long her recovery takes. It is first versus third, amazingly, 8 games in. I think most people would have expected at the start of the season that it'd be Chelsea, Manchester City and Arsenal in the top 3 pretty much all the way. Maybe Manchester United creeping in. But no, Daria Vidicic is doing a hell of a job at Brighton, down on the south coast, obviously, and Crawley as well. To get Brighton as high as third still this far in the season and looking pretty good as a team. They're not there by accident. Chelsea have won a lot of the 14 meetings between these two sides so far. 11 of them have gone Chelsea's way, 2 of them have been draws and just 1 Brighton win. Chelsea have actually won all 4 of the last matches between them, and all 4 of those were by 2 or more goals. So obviously this is the first time they're playing each other under the new stewardship of both sides of Bompastor and Vidicic. I think you probably safely say that both sides probably improved overall. Only 1 of Brighton's 14 WSL goals this season have come in away matches. They are definitely a lot better at home than they are away. So going up against Chelsea, definitely the best team in the league, is going to be a tough task. Chelsea have won all 12 matches in all competitions since Bompastor took over in the summer, including clean sheet in each of their last 4 WSL games. So they are not only winning, but they are completely shutting out the opposition and just racking up the clean sheets for Hannah Hampton. Chelsea do have the best record against their XG in the WSL this season at plus 8.3. So they're scoring 8.3 goals more than they should do given their XG. And against their post-shot XG, which obviously is adjusted just for shots on target, they are 4.2 above. So they are really outperforming and showing that their strikers are of an elite level. You think of Ugura Wrighton, she is obviously the second top scorer in the WSL this season. You think of Ramirez, Agibiva Jones, they really spread the goals out because they've got a lot of high quality players. As I mentioned, Ugura Wrighton is the second top scorer in the league with 6 goals, 5 from open play and 1 penalty, although she does have no assists so far, which I thought was quite interesting. Agibiva Jones is the player with the most shots on target per 90 in the WSL this season with 2.8. No one else has anywhere close, really. Lauren Hemp, who is obviously another elite player, is only at 1.9 shots on target per 90. So Agibiva Jones is really doing well when she comes on. I think it's a little bit like Stina Blackstenius. Agibiva Jones hasn't been starting a lot in the league. She tends to come on late on. Not necessarily when Chelsea are desperate for a goal, because they very rarely are desperate for a goal. But when you're coming on later in a game and the game's kind of gone, it's a bit lower risk. You can probably start having a few more shots. And she's obviously getting a lot of them on target, which is really good. The 2 players in the league with their best sort of overperformance versus XG are both going to be playing in this game. Ugura Wrighton is second most with 2.2. She is a little bit lower after missing a penalty. But Kiko Seiko is still number 1 in the league at 2.6 more than the XG would suggest, with 4 goals from just 1.6 XG. Johanna Rytting-Kaneryd is another player I just want to shout out because I think Lauren Hemp has been the player of the season so far. Bunny Shaw is up there as well. So is Guru Writer, but so is Johanna Witten-Kannered. She is not obviously up for the top scorer in the WSL, but she's contributing a lot, and she is one of the top 2 players in a lot of different creative metrics, including progressive carries, which she is number 1 at 29 in the 8 matches so far, and I think she has featured in all 8 of those. In terms of how I think this game is going to go, I'm quite excited for this one. I think it's going to be a really entertaining game, even if it's not. I don't think it's going to be the most high-scoring game of the weekend, but I think it probably will be the most entertaining. I think there's going to be chances at both ends. I think, although Chelsea are obviously such a dominant team in terms of results, I actually think that Brighton are going to be the team that has the most possession in this game. We've seen that Chelsea, in other games so far this season, they don't always dominate possession just because they're better. Just because they're more likely to get the win. Think about the first game of the season when they played Aston Villa. They obviously only got a 1-0 win, but Aston Villa had more possession in that game as well. Brighton are a team that likes to have a lot of possession. Their centre-backs complete a lot of passes, as do their centre midfielders. So I think Chelsea are going to almost allow them the ball a bit, and they will still threaten them in another way, because if you haven't noticed, Sonia Bonpastor is quite good at this managerial malarkey. Guro Bergsvand is one of the reasons that I say that as well. She has the best pass completion in the league at 93.3%. And I think Yorlin Karabali is one of the top 3 players for touches in the league. Might be top 5, something like that. So, yeah, their centre-backs are on the ball a lot. And even if they're not threatening that much, they're passing it around the sort of back 5 that they play generally. And I think Chelsea will let them do that and then maybe look to press and set traps. So Brighton will play well. Don't get me wrong, they'll play well. They'll probably create some chances, but I think Chelsea will just be better because they just are that bit more elite. So I'm going to go for a Chelsea 2-0 win. The final match of the weekend is on Sunday at 2 o'clock at the Chigwell Stadium on BBC iPlayer as well. It is the only London derby of the weekend as West Ham host Crystal Palace. It is a chance for Izzy Atkinson to face her former club after leaving West Ham in the summer for Crystal Palace. There has been, unfortunately, another ACL injury for a WSL player, with Brooke Aspin picking one up at sort of international duty for England age group level. It is 2 teams down the bottom of the table, Leicester and Palace. Either team could go as high as 7th with a win, though, because of how close sort of that bottom half of the table is. The last time these 2 sides met was quite a while ago, 5 years ago in December 2019. West Ham won that 7-0 in the League Cup. Matt Beard was manager. The goals that day, and you might recognise some of these names, were from Leanne Kiernan, Laura Vetterline, and then Adriana Leon got 1, Kenta Darley got 2, and Kate Longhurst also got 2 off the bench. It also featured Anna Morehouse. Obviously, she's just won the NWSL, Gilly Flaherty, and Martha Thomas. So a lot of names that are still either making headlines playing or, doing well in the media, or just, in our memories still, even though that match was quite a while ago. And obviously Matt Beard still doing good things at Liverpool. West Ham got their first league win in their last home game. It was a 1-0 against Leicester. They have lost the other 3 of their last 4 games, though, so they're not a team in great form. They haven't scored 2 or more goals in a home game in the WSL since February, which isn't great, and probably shows why they're languishing down near the bottom of the table. Palace have the longest winless streak in the league, though, so in their last 5 WSL games, they've picked up just 2 points, which is obviously 2 draws, as well as 3 losses. But they've been, I don't necessarily think unfortunate, but they have definitely been good value for the goals they've scored. They just, I think, need to work a little bit more on their sort of defensive qualities. West Ham, though, I do think they're a team that are going to struggle the further on in the season we go, because their players are going to get tired. They're not in loads of competitions, but they are using the fewest players in the league. They've only used 18 so far in 8 matches this season. Most teams have used 20, 21, maybe even 22. So for West Ham to have only used 18 is not a lot. Palace, however, do have some stats for themselves where they're not looking too great. They have had the lowest possession in the league with 40% and the lowest number of passes completed in the league as well. Although West Ham are third worst for both of those, they have had just 43% possession and the third fewest passes as well. Vivasey is the player that has both committed the most fouls with 22 and drawn the most fouls with 16. She is a player that's just been getting in the midst of it. I guess getting stuck in is probably the general phrase that people use. So expect a lot more of that. 38 fouls for just one player in 8 appearances. Almost 5 a game, one every 20 minutes or so. That is quite a lot. And I want to give a shout out to Abby Larkin as well. She's the only player that has made an appearance as a sub in all 8 games so far this season. A few players are there on 7, but they either don't get subbed on every game, or they might have actually got a start because their team needs them, and they're obviously doing well enough to get a sub. But yeah, Abby Larkin is still subbing on in every single match so far this season. If she doesn't start against Palace, you can probably expect she's going to sub on. This is probably the game that I found the hardest to call in the WSL this weekend. I think it's going to be quite a low-scoring game. I know Palace have had a few high-scoring games so far, but they're not winning games, and West Ham also aren't scoring a lot. So I don't think either team are going to score multiple goals. I think it's going to be 0 or 1 goal per team. So, it could be a 1-1, could be a 0-0, or either team could win 1-0. I think you can tell that as I'm doing this, even in my notes that I wrote down, I still wasn't 100% sure what I was going to go for. I kind of want to go for Palace, but I think that's more just because they're new to the league and I kind of want to see them do well. I think my head tells me that actually it's probably going to be West Ham. Katrina Gorry is doing fantastic at the moment. She's obviously a nominee for November Player of the Month. Deservedly so. She got a couple of games to get West Ham, a couple of goals, to get West Ham in the game against Brighton, even if they didn't actually end up winning it. But in games generally, she's just been putting in really good defensive performances, getting loads of recoveries, that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go for a 1-0 West Ham win. So there we have it, listener. That is my Game Week 9 preview, looking ahead to the 6 matches as the WSL comes back into action for, the penultimate time in 2024. Thank you again, as always, for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. If you did enjoy today's episode, please do follow or subscribe, especially if I've managed to get the video working. You've got this on YouTube. So wherever you get your podcast, follow or subscribe, give it a like, that kind of stuff. And it does really help if you can give us a 5-star review. If you're on Spotify or Apple, it does go a long way into helping others find the show. You can also join the conversation on Reddit. We've got our own Reddit page on Decoding the WSL, and obviously our own Instagram page now. For even more sort of stats and insights and that sort of stuff, do follow me. A lot of my stuff is on X and Blue Sky. They are sort of the main places to give me a follow. I do some stuff on Instagram as well, although I've been a bit busy at the moment, so I've been a bit quiet on there. But I will pick that back up, if not this year, then in the new year. And if you do want to get in touch, obviously, as always, just drop me a message on socials. You can send an email to decodingthewslpod@gmail.com. Because I always like to hear your thoughts. Some people have given me ideas for some episodes to do, which is great. I got one about how Chelsea have changed this season compared to previous seasons. I've had a request about looking at Man City's winger situation, your Lauren Hemps, Chloe Kelly's, Mary Fowler, Alba Vigino, and who's playing and why some other players aren't playing. And I'm also having a look at something in the last week or so about the lineal champions. This is something you might have heard of in the men's side of the game, but as far as I'm aware, no one has ever looked into this in the women's side. So we're looking at, since the first recognised game by FIFA, that's my starting point in the 70s, not because FIFA have done so much for the women's game that I think I should applaud them, but just because that was a good starting point at a point where I can actually find some data. For a lot of the sort of historic stuff in the women's game, it's really hard to find the matches that were actually played. So starting in the 70s was hard enough. And just having a look through history about when teams have played and who has sort of the lineal belt. So I think In the first game, it was France against Netherlands. So whoever wins that, I won't ruin it, but whoever wins that gets to start off with the belt, and then they keep the belt until they get beaten. That's how it works. And we keep going until the modern day to see who ends up with the belt at the moment. So that'll be something that I'm looking at, creating a pod for that as well, and probably a video on YouTube. A proper thing for that. So those are the things to look out for over either the Christmas break or just, at times when I get time throughout the season, maybe when we get breaks in the WSL. But as I mentioned, thank you again for listening, listener. Thank you for joining me, and I will speak to you at the next one.